He thought it was scrap metal until his dog refused to leave, and he uncovered a secret buried beneath the ocean floor. In a fog-covered dock town in Astoria, Oregon, a homeless Navy SEAL named Jack Turner takes one last dive for a routine job. But beneath the cold, silent water, something impossible waits, a train wagon, untouched by time. As his loyal K9 Ghost senses danger before anyone else, Jack is pulled into a mystery far darker than the ocean itself. Comment 1 if you'd follow your instincts no matter the risk, or 0 if you'd walk away. And tell us where you're watching from. The fog rolled in low over Astoria before dawn, swallowing the docks in a cold, quiet gray that seemed to press down on everything it touched. Rusted cranes stood like skeletons along the waterfront, their long arms frozen mid-reach, while the tide whispered against rotting wood pilings. It was the kind of morning where the world felt paused, like even time had decided to wait. Parked just beyond the reach of the streetlights sat a battered old pickup truck, its paint worn down to bare metal in places, its windshield streaked with salt and neglect. Inside, Jack Turner lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the cab. He hadn't really slept. He rarely did anymore. A faint tremor moved through his fingers before he slowly clenched them into fists, grounding himself. The memory had come again, same as always. Metal screaming under pressure, water rushing in. Voices shouting over comms that suddenly went dead, the weight of the ocean closing in like a fist. Jack blinked hard, forcing the image away. "Not today," he muttered under his breath. A soft shift beside the truck broke the silence. Outside, curled up on an old wool blanket, a German shepherd lifted his head. Ghost's ears twitched first. Then his eyes opened, sharp, alert, focused entirely on the truck. He didn't bark. He didn't move right away. He just watched. Always watching. Jack pushed open the truck door, the hinges creaking loud in the still air. The cold hit him immediately, biting through his worn jacket as his boots touched the damp gravel. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing in the salt-heavy air, letting it settle something inside him. Ghost rose slowly and walked over without hesitation, pressing his shoulder lightly against Jack's leg. Jack exhaled. "Yeah," he said quietly, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "I'm up." Ghost stayed there, solid and steady, like an anchor in a world that had long since drifted away from Jack. The town didn't wake fast. Astoria never did. A few lights flickered on in distant houses, and somewhere out on the water, a fishing boat engine coughed to life. But along the docks, most people kept their distance from Jack. They knew who he was, or at least, they knew enough. Former Navy SEAL. Came back different. Didn't stay long anywhere. Didn't talk much. Didn't smile at all. Some said he drank. Others said he'd seen things no man should. Most just avoided him altogether. It was easier that way. Jack didn't mind. People asked questions. Ghost didn't. Jack reached into the truck bed and pulled out a small metal thermos. The coffee inside was cold, bitter, and strong enough to sting. He took a long drink anyway. "Got a job today," he said, almost like he was thinking out loud. Ghost's ears perked slightly. Jack nodded toward the harbor. "Survey crew needs an extra diver. Easy work, just scanning seabed, checking for debris. He paused, then added, "Nothing complicated, nothing dangerous." At least that's what they'd told him. Ghost watched him closely, as if weighing the words, as if he understood more than Jack ever said out loud. Jack gave a dry, humorless smile. "Yeah, I know. They always say that." He set the thermos down and reached for his gear, a worn duffel bag filled with dive equipment that had seen better days. Each piece was maintained with careful precision, every strap checked, every buckle secure. Some habits never left you. SEAL training didn't just fade, it stayed in your bones. Jack slung the bag over his shoulder and started walking toward the dock. Ghost moved with him, silent, close, matching his pace step for step. They didn't need commands. They never had. As they approached the pier, a small research vessel came into view through the fog. The Orion. It wasn't much to look at. Steel hull, patched paint, equipment bolted wherever it would fit. But it was functional, reliable. Good enough. A man stood near the edge of the deck, waving a clipboard in one hand. "You, Turner?" he called out. Jack gave a short nod. The man looked him over, taking in the worn clothes, the rough beard, the quiet intensity in his eyes. Then his gaze shifted to Ghost. "You bring the dog everywhere?" Jack didn't answer right away. He just reached down and rested his hand on Ghost's head. "Yeah," he said finally. "Everywhere." The man hesitated, then shrugged. "As long as he stays out of the way." Ghost didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Jack stepped onto the boat, boots thudding softly against the metal deck. The fog seemed thicker out here, wrapping around the vessel like a curtain. The world beyond it felt distant, unreal. For a moment, Jack paused. Something in the air felt off. Not loud, not obvious. Just a quiet shift, a subtle tension. The kind you learned to recognize when your life depended on it. Ghost stopped beside him, body rigid now. Ears forward, eyes locked on the dark water below. A low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest. Jack's jaw tightened. He followed the dog's gaze, staring into the gray surface of the ocean. There was nothing there. Just water. Just fog. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it deepened. Jack slowly exhaled. He whispered, more to Ghost than to himself. "I feel it too." The engine kicked on, breaking the silence as the Orion began to drift away from the dock. The shoreline faded behind them, swallowed by fog and distance. Jack stood at the stern, one hand resting lightly on Ghost's back. The ocean stretched out ahead, wide, empty, and unknowable. And somewhere beneath it, something was waiting. He didn't know what yet, but Ghost did. And Ghost never got it wrong. Not once. Jack's grip tightened slightly as the boat moved farther into the gray. For the first time in a long while, the emptiness inside him shifted, just enough to make room for something else. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. Something that felt like the beginning of a story he hadn't meant to find, and one he wouldn't be able to walk away from. The Orion pushed through the fog like a slow-moving shadow, its hull cutting a quiet path across the gray water. The engine hummed low beneath Jack's boots, steady and predictable, one of the few things in his life that still made sense. He stood near the stern, arms folded, eyes scanning the horizon even though there was nothing to see. Just fog, endless, thick, swallowing everything beyond a few hundred yards. Ghost stayed close, pressed against Jack's leg, his body tense in a way that didn't match the calm surface of the sea. Jack noticed. He always did. "You still feeling it?" Jack asked under his breath. Ghost didn't look at him. His eyes remained locked on the water, unblinking. That was answer enough. "Hey, Turner." Jack turned as a man approached from the cabin, wiping his hands on a rag. Mid-30s, baseball cap turned backward, a permanent half-smirk like he didn't take much seriously. "Hank," the man said, tapping his chest. "I run sonar. You're our eyes down there." Jack gave a short nod. Hank glanced at Ghost. "Dog looks like he knows something we don't." Jack didn't respond right away. He just looked back at the water. "Maybe he does." Hank chuckled lightly, like it was a joke, and gestured toward the cabin. "Come on. You should see this." Inside, the cabin smelled like electronics, stale coffee, and salt air. Screens lined the walls, casting a dim glow across the cramped space. The hum of equipment filled the silence. At the center, a sonar display pulsed with shifting shapes, lines, shadows, fragments of the ocean floor translated into something almost readable. Hank leaned forward and tapped the screen. "We picked something up about 20 minutes ago," he said. "Didn't think much of it at first. Probably just scrap metal or old junk." Jack stepped closer. The image flickered, then stabilized. And something about it made his stomach tighten. The shape was wrong. Too clean. Too structured. Straight lines, sharp angles, symmetry that didn't belong on a natural seabed. Jack narrowed his eyes. "Depth?" 80 meters, Hank replied. "Give or take." Jack studied the image longer. The longer he looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't debris. Debris didn't look like that. "Run it again," Jack said. Hank raised an eyebrow but adjusted the controls. The screen refreshed, sending out another pulse. The shape came back. Clearer this time. Long, rectangular, segmented. Jack felt something shift in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. "Rotate it," he said quietly. Hank did. The angle changed. And suddenly, it was obvious. Jack exhaled slowly. "That's not scrap." Hank leaned in. "Then what is it?" Jack didn't answer right away. He traced a finger just above the screen, following the outline. "You see these?" he said. "These curved sections along the bottom?" Hank squinted. "Yeah, kind of." "Wheel housings." Hank blinked. "Wait, what?" Jack stepped back slightly, arms crossing again. "That's a train car." The words hung in the air. For a second, no one spoke. Then Hank let out a short laugh. "A train car? Out here?" Jack didn't smile. Hank's grin faded. "You serious?" Jack nodded once. Hank looked back at the screen, then at Jack, then back again. "That doesn't make any sense." No, Jack said. It doesn't. A heavier-set man stepped in from the doorway. Captain Avery. Weathered face, gray at the temples, eyes that had seen enough storms to stop being surprised by them. What doesn't make sense? He asked. Hank gestured to the screen. Turner thinks we found a train car. Avery snorted softly. Out here? You've been breathing too much compressed air already? Jack didn't react. He just pointed at the display. Look at the structure, the spacing, the symmetry. It's manufactured, not industrial scrap, not pipe, not barge. Avery stepped closer, studying the image. His expression shifted, just slightly. Enough. Could have been transported, Avery muttered. Fell off something. Jack shook his head. If it fell, it would show impact damage. Twisting. Breakage. He tapped the screen lightly. This doesn't. The cabin grew quiet. Even the hum of the equipment seemed to fade into the background. Hank leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. So you're saying someone put it there? Jack didn't answer, because he didn't know. But the thought had already formed. Ghost's bark cut through the silence. Sharp. Sudden. Everyone turned. Through the cabin window, the dog stood at the edge of the deck, rigid, staring down at the water. Not barking wildly. Focused. Warning. Jack's chest tightened. That's not normal, Hank said. Jack was already moving. He stepped out onto the deck, the cold air hitting him again. Ghost didn't look away from the water as Jack approached. What is it? Jack asked quietly. Ghost let out a low growl, deep and controlled. Jack followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the surface. Rippling. Gray. But the feeling came back stronger now. That same pressure in his chest. That same instinct. Danger. Not loud. Not immediate. But real. Behind him, Avery stepped out onto the deck. We're not chasing ghosts, Turner. We've got a schedule. Jack didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the water. Circle back, he said. Avery frowned. What? Bring us over it again. Avery hesitated. For what? It's not. Jack cut in, calm but firm. The tone made Avery pause. Jack finally turned, meeting his eyes. Give me one pass, he said. If I'm wrong, we move on. Avery studied him for a long second. Then he looked at the dog. Still frozen. Still staring. Still not wrong. Avery exhaled through his nose. Fine. One pass. He turned and barked an order toward the helm. Moments later, the Orion shifted course. The engine deepened as the boat adjusted, cutting back through the fog. Jack stood at the edge, Ghost beside him. Waiting. Watching. The water below seemed darker now. Heavier, like it was hiding something. When the boat settled over the position again, Hank's voice called from inside. Got it! Jack didn't move. Bring it up, he called back. The sonar pinged. The screen inside flickered. And then, there it was again, clearer than before. Long, still, impossible. A train car. sitting perfectly still at the bottom of the ocean. Ghost let out another low growl. Jack's jaw tightened. "Suit me up," he said. Avery stepped forward. "You sure about this?" Jack didn't hesitate. "No," he said. Then he looked back at the water. "But I'm going anyway. Because whatever was down there wasn't supposed to be." And something inside him, something he thought he'd buried a long time ago, was waking up again. Not fear. Not yet. But the same instinct that used to keep men alive. And right now, it was telling him one thing. Go down. Jack stood at the edge of the deck, the ocean stretching out beneath him like a sheet of dark glass. The fog pressed in tighter now, muting sound, dulling distance, turning the world into something smaller and more enclosed. He had felt this before. Not here. Not like this. But the feeling itself, sharp, quiet, undeniable, the kind that never explained itself, only warned. Behind him, the crew moved with a little less certainty now. The easy confidence from earlier had faded, replaced with something quieter, something heavier. Hank stood near the cabin door, arms crossed. "You really think it's worth it?" Jack didn't turn. "Yeah," he said. There was no hesitation in his voice. That alone made Hank stop asking questions. Captain Avery stepped up beside him, hands on his hips. "One dive," he said. "You go down, take a look, and come straight back up. No hero stuff." Jack gave a small nod. "Understood." Avery studied him for a moment longer, then added, "And you stay on comms the whole time." Jack didn't answer that part. Because sometimes comms didn't matter. Sometimes they failed. Sometimes all you had was instinct. And right now, instinct was louder than anything else. Ghost moved closer, pressing against Jack's leg again. But this time there was no calm in it. No grounding. The dog's muscles were tight. His breathing shallow. His eyes locked on the water with an intensity Jack hadn't seen in a long time. Not since the desert. Not since the mission they never talked about. Jack crouched down, placing both hands on Ghost's shoulders. "Hey," he said softly. Ghost didn't look at him. Jack leaned in closer. "Talk to me." The dog's ears flicked slightly, but his gaze never broke from the ocean. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest. Not fear, not panic. Warning. Jack felt it settle into him like weight. "You don't like this," he said quietly. Ghost didn't move, didn't blink, didn't back down. Jack exhaled slowly and nodded once as if answering something only he could hear. "Yeah," he said. "I figured." He stood and reached for his gear. The motions came back without thinking, checking straps, securing the tank, testing the regulator. Each step was precise, controlled, automatic. Years of training, years of repetition. Even now, with everything else gone, that part of him still worked, still held. Ghost paced now, circling Jack once, then twice, restless in a way that felt different from before. Jack noticed. "Stay," he said firmly. Ghost stopped, but only barely. Every part of him strained toward the water. Jack stepped onto the dive platform, the metal cold beneath his boots. The ocean moved slowly below, shifting with a rhythm that felt almost too calm, too quiet. He pulled the mask over his face, sealing himself in. The world narrowed instantly. Sound faded. Breath became the only thing that mattered. In, out. In, out. But then, a sound. Sharp. Loud. Metal screaming. Water rushing in. Men shouting. Jack froze. The deck disappeared. The ocean wasn't below him anymore. It was everywhere. Dark. Crushing. Endless. His hands tightened involuntarily. Breathing sped up. Too fast. Too shallow. Not here. Not now. The past surged forward, dragging him under before he ever left the surface. Then pressure. Solid, real, ghost. The dog's body pressed hard against Jack's side, breaking through the memory like a blade cutting through fog. Jack's head snapped slightly to the side. The present slammed back into place. Deck ocean, cold air, ghost. The dog stood against him, unmoving, steady, refusing to let go. Jack closed his eyes for half a second, then inhaled slowly. Deep, controlled, just like before. In, out, again. Ghost didn't move until Jack's breathing matched his own pace. Only then did the dog step back. But not far. Never far. Jack reached down and rested his hand on Ghost's head. "Got it," he said quietly. The tremor in his fingers was gone. The world steadied. The ocean returned to being just water. But the feeling underneath it, that tension, that pull, it remained. Stronger now. Clearer. Jack looked down again. Whatever was waiting down there, it wasn't random. It wasn't harmless. And Ghost knew it. That mattered more than anything. Jack straightened, checking his gear one last time. Avery's voice came from behind him. "You good?" Jack didn't look back. "Yeah." Hank leaned out from the cabin. "We'll track you the whole way. You see anything weird? You come straight back." Jack gave a slight nod, but his eyes stayed on the water. Ghost stepped forward again, closer than before, almost blocking Jack's path. Jack paused. For a moment, the two of them just stood there. Man and dog. No words, no commands, just understanding. Jack crouched again, bringing his face level with Ghost's. "Listen," he said quietly. "I need you up here." Ghost didn't move. Jack held his gaze. "I go down," he continued. "You stay. Watch." The dog's ears shifted slightly. A flicker of hesitation. Then, slowly, Ghost stepped back, not willingly, but deliberately. Jack nodded once. Good. He stood, adjusted his mask, and moved to the edge. The ocean waited silent, patient. He didn't count down, didn't hesitate. He just stepped back and let himself fall. The water swallowed him instantly. Cold, heavy, total. Sound vanished. Light fractured into dim green shadows. Jack equalized his ears, steadied his breathing, and began his descent. The rope line guided him down, a thin connection to the world above. Each meter deeper, the surface faded, each breath louder than the last. 40 feet, 60, 80. The light dimmed. Shapes began to form below. At first, just shadows. Then edges, lines, structure. Jack slowed. His pulse steadied. The beam of his dive light cut through the dark, and there it was, the train car. Larger than he expected. Long. Still. Half buried in sand like it had always been there. No debris, no wreckage, no damage, just placed. Jack hovered in the water, staring. Something about it felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. Not broken. Not destroyed. Just out of place. Like a piece of another world dropped into this one. He moved closer, slowly, carefully. The metal surface came into view, smooth in places, worn in others, touched by time but not by violence. His gloved hand reached out, hovered for a second, then touched it. Cold steel, real, solid. Jack exhaled slowly. "Orion," he said into his comm. Static crackled. "Go ahead," Hank's voice came through. Jack didn't look away from the structure. "It's real." A pause. Then, "What is it?" Jack's light moved across the length of the object, tracing the windows, the seams, the unmistakable shape. He swallowed once. "It's a train car," he said. Silence answered him. Even through the static, he could feel it. Disbelief. Confusion. Fear. Jack drifted closer to one of the windows. Dark, clouded, unmoving. He angled his light inside, but the beam only disappeared into shadow. He couldn't see far. Not yet. Behind him, far above, the surface rippled faintly. And somewhere up there, Ghost waited. Watching. Knowing. Jack steadied himself. Because whatever was inside that train car, he hadn't seen it yet. Jack hovered just outside the darkened window, the beam of his dive light cutting a narrow path through suspended particles drifting like dust in an abandoned room. The ocean pressed in around him, heavy and quiet, swallowing everything beyond a few feet of visibility. He adjusted his position, kicking slowly, keeping his movements controlled. No sudden motions, no wasted energy. The train car stretched longer than he expected, longer than any single passenger carriage should have been. Its outline extended into shadow, disappearing into the dark where his light couldn't reach. Jack angled downward, following the curve of the structure. The wheels came into view next. Half buried in sand. Still intact. Steel rims, thick axles, untouched by the kind of damage that should have brought something like this here. He slowed again. There was no impact zone, no debris field, no sign of a crash. Just a train car, sitting at the bottom of the ocean, like it had been placed there. Deliberately. Jack's breathing grew heavier inside the mask. He forced it back under control. In, out, slow, measured. "Orion," he said quietly into the comm. Static answered first. Then Hank's voice, faint but steady. "We've got you. What are you seeing?" Jack didn't take his eyes off the structure. "No damage," he said. "No breakage. It's intact." There was a pause on the other end. "That's not possible," Hank replied. Jack didn't argue, because he agreed, but he was looking at it, touching it, feeling the cold steel beneath his glove. It was real. He moved along the side of the car, drifting toward what looked like the front section. The windows became clearer here, long rows, evenly spaced, darkened by time and the ocean's slow claim. He reached one and wiped at it gently with his glove. A thin layer of algae smeared away. The glass beneath was still there, unbroken. Jack leaned closer, pressing his light against the surface. The beam pushed through the murk just enough to reveal shapes inside. Rows, seats, still aligned, still upright. Nothing disturbed. No signs of panic. No chaos. It didn't look like a wreck. It looked like a place that had simply stopped. Jack felt the tension in his chest tighten. Places didn't end like this. Not without a reason. He pulled back slightly, scanning the exterior again. The doors. That was the next step. He moved toward what should have been the main entry point, his light sweeping across the surface until it caught the outline of a sealed door. The metal around it was corroded, but the structure itself held firm. No warping, no signs of forced entry. It hadn't been opened in a long time. Maybe decades. Jack reached out and tested the handle. It didn't move. Locked or fused shut by time. He exhaled slowly. "Doors sealed," he said into the calm. "You going inside?" Hank asked. Jack didn't answer right away. He looked back at the length of the car, at the stillness, at the silence that seemed too complete. His instincts weren't screaming anymore. They were quieter now, more focused, which was worse. Because that's how it always started. Not chaos, not panic, just a quiet shift. The kind that came before everything went wrong. Jack looked at the door again, then at the window, then at the endless dark stretching beyond the train. Something about this place felt contained. Like whatever had happened here hadn't been allowed to escape. He pushed off gently, circling the car once more, checking, confirming. No movement, no structural instability, no immediate threat. But the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it deepened. Above him, far beyond the dim light, the surface shimmered faintly. And somewhere up there, Ghost waited. Jack could feel it. That connection, that silent understanding that had never failed him. If the dog had reacted like that, there was a reason. Jack stopped near another window, closer to the center of the car. He wiped it again. This time he pressed his light harder against the glass. The beam cut deeper, further. And for a moment, he thought he saw something. A shape. Not part of the seat, not part of the structure. Something sitting there. Still. Jack leaned in closer, adjusted the angle. The light flickered slightly as particles shifted in the water. And then nothing, just shadow again. He pulled back slowly. His heartbeat picked up. "Orion," he said, quieter now. "Yeah?" Hank replied. "I think there's something inside." A pause. What kind of something? Jack didn't answer, because he wasn't sure, and guessing didn't help anyone. "I need to get a better look," he said instead. "Negative." Avery's voice cut in, firm now. "You've seen enough for one dive. Mark the location and come back up." Jack's jaw tightened slightly. He understood the call. Standard procedure. Unknown structure. Limited visibility. Don't push it. But something inside him resisted. Not recklessly, not emotionally, just deliberately. He looked at the window again. At the darkness beyond it. At the feeling that something was there. Waiting. Not moving. Not changing. Just there. Jack exhaled slowly. Copy, he said. But he didn't move right away. He hovered there for another second. Then another. His light flicked across the surface one last time, trying to catch something. Anything. But the ocean gave nothing back. Only silence. Finally, he pushed off, turning away from the train. The rope line came back into view above him, faint but steady. A path back, a way out. Jack began his ascent, whoa, controlled, every movement measured, but his mind stayed below, on the train, on the shape behind the glass, on the feeling that this wasn't over, not even close. Halfway up, he paused briefly to stabilize his ascent. His breathing echoed louder in the mask. The water around him felt colder now. He didn't look back, didn't need to. Because he already knew, whatever was down there, was still there. Waiting. And next time, he wouldn't stop at the window. The surface broke around him in a rush of sound and light. Jack pulled off his mask as he was hauled up onto the deck, water streaming off his gear, his breath heavier than he wanted it to be. The world above felt louder, brighter, almost unreal after the silence below. "What did you see?" Hank asked immediately, stepping forward. Jack didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of the platform for a second, hands resting on his knees, eyes still distant, still down there. Ghost was already there. The dog moved in fast but controlled, pressing against Jack's side, scanning him, checking him. A low whine escaped his throat. Not fear, not panic, concern. Jack placed a hand on Ghost's neck. "I'm good," he murmured. Ghost didn't fully relax. Not yet. Jack looked up at the crew. "It's a train car," he said. The words settled heavier this time. No one laughed. Avery crossed his arms. "You sure?" Jack nodded once. "Passenger car. Intact. No impact damage, no debris." Hank shook his head slowly. "That's not possible." "No," Jack said. "It's not." A brief silence followed. Then Avery spoke again, quieter this time. "You see inside?" Jack hesitated. Not clearly. He didn't mention the shape. Not yet. Something about it felt unfinished, like a sentence he hadn't heard the end of. Avery exhaled. "We log it, mark coordinates, report it. That's the job." Jack looked at him, then back at the water. "That's not the job," he said. Avery frowned. "What?" Jack stood, pulling off his gloves. "Something's in there." Hank glanced between them. "Like what?" Jack met his eyes. "I don't know." That was the problem. Avery's expression hardened slightly. "Then we don't go guessing. We come back with proper clearance, equipment." "I'm going back down," Jack said. The words were calm, flat, certain. Avery stared at him. Not without a plan, you're not. Jack didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at the ocean again. And Ghost followed his gaze. That was enough. 10 minutes, Jack said. I prep, I go in, I confirm what's inside. Avery shook his head. You're pushing it. Jack turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. I'm finishing it. There was something in his tone now. Not defiance, not ego, just resolution. Avery held his gaze for a long moment, then looked at the dog. Ghost stood still, focused, unmoving. Avery exhaled through his nose. 10 minutes, he said finally. You lose comms, you come back, no exceptions. Jack nodded once. That was all he needed. The second time felt different. The gear was the same. The ocean was the same. But the weight had shifted. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was confirmation. Jack stepped onto the platform again. Ghost moved in close, closer than before. Jack crouched down, resting his forehead briefly against the dog's. I go in this time, he said quietly. Ghost didn't move, didn't pull away. Jack exhaled. Hold the line for me. A beat. Then Ghost stepped back. Just enough. Jack stood, checked his gear, then dropped backward into the ocean. The descent was faster this time, more direct. No hesitation. The rope line guided him down, and the shape of the train emerged sooner than before, like it had been waiting. Jack didn't circle it this time, didn't study it from the outside. He went straight for the door. The metal handle was still there, still locked, still unmoving. Jack reached for the cutting tool clipped to his belt. A small torch. Precise. Controlled. He ignited it. The flame burned bright in the dark water, sending bubbles rushing upward as heat met steel lowly, carefully. He worked the edge of the door, melting away corrosion, breaking the seal. Each movement deliberate, each second stretching longer than the last. Then a shift. The metal gave slightly. Jack shut off the torch, grabbed the handle, pulled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door cracked open. A burst of silt exploded outward, clouding the water in a thick, choking haze. Jack pulled back, letting it settle. His light cut through the cloud slowly. Shapes began to form. Inside, the aisle. Rows of seats, still aligned, still untouched. Jack moved forward, crossed the threshold. The moment he entered, something changed. The silence deepened. Not empty, not neutral. Heavy, like the air inside carried weight, even underwater. His light swept across the first row. Seats. Fabric worn but intact. A bag slumped against one side. A shoe lying in the aisle. Everything frozen, abandoned, but not disturbed. Jack moved slowly down the aisle, each step careful, each movement controlled. His breathing echoed louder now, too loud, too sharp. He forced it back down, in, out. Then, his light caught something. Midway down the car, a shape, not a seat, not debris, something, upright. Jack slowed. The beam steadied, and then, He saw it. A skeleton. Sitting in the seat. Facing forward. Still. Hands resting near its lap. No. Not resting. Jack moved closer. The truth came into focus. The wrists. Bound. Metal cuffs locked tight around bone, attached to the frame of the seat. Jack froze. For a moment, the ocean disappeared. The past rushed in. Flash, metal, voices. Men trapped. Men who couldn't move. Men who didn't make it out. His breath hitched. Too fast. Too sharp. The mask fogged slightly. Not here, not now. But the image wouldn't let go. The skeleton sat there like it had been waiting, like it had never left. Jack forced himself forward, closer. His light moved over the remains. Clothing fragments clung to bone. Dark fabric. Uniform-like. Not civilian. Something official. Something structured. Jack swallowed. Orion, he said quietly. Static answered first. Then Hank's voice, tighter now. We got you. What is it? Jack didn't look away. There's a body, he said. A pause. Then, a body? Jack shook his head slightly. Not just a body. He moved the light to the wrists again, to the cuffs, to the way they held the skeleton in place. He's restrained silence. Even through the comms, he could feel it. The shift. The realization. Jack's chest tightened. This wasn't a wreck. This wasn't an accident. This was something else. Something worse. Above the surface, Ghost began barking loud, sharp, relentless. Jack didn't hear it. But somehow, he felt it. And down there in the silent dark, the truth finally began to take shape. Jack didn't move for a long second. The beam of his light held steady on the skeleton, on the metal cuffs biting into bone that had long since stopped resisting. The posture wasn't chaotic. It wasn't twisted or collapsed. It was controlled. Like the person had been placed there, or forced to stay. Jack's jaw tightened. He pulled his light away slowly and scanned the rest of the car, row after row, seat after seat. Empty, but not abandoned in a rush. No torn fabric, no scattered chaos, no signs of panic, just stillness. Intentional stillness. Jack moved forward down the aisle, each step slower than the last. His light swept across the floor, catching small details now, things he hadn't noticed before. A rusted latch, a broken pair of glasses, a metal tag half buried in sediment. He crouched slightly and picked it up. The tag was corroded, edges eaten away by time, but the imprint was still faintly visible. Numbers. Not a name, just a number. Jack stared at it for a second, then slipped it into a pouch on his vest. Orion, he said quietly. I'm seeing identification tags, not personal, numbered. Hank's voice came back, lower now, like, military? Jack shook his head instinctively, even though they couldn't see him. No, he said, more like inventory. The word hung there. Inventory. He moved again, deeper into the car. His light reached the midpoint, and then something changed. The layout shifted. The open rows of seats gave way to something tighter, narrower. Jack slowed. The aisle constricted, leading toward a reinforced section of the car. The metal walls here were thicker, the structure heavier, designed for something more than passengers. His pulse picked up again. "Orion," he said, "there's a partition ahead." "Define partition," Avery's voice came through. Jack stepped closer. His light revealed vertical bars. Steel, thick, spaced just wide enough to see through, but not wide enough to pass. "Bars," Jack said. Silence answered him. Then Hank, quieter than before. "Bars. Like what?" Jack didn't answer immediately, because he already knew. He moved closer, angling his light through the gaps. Behind the bars, small compartments, narrow, confined, each one barely large enough for a person, some empty, some not. Jack froze again. Shapes on the floor, against the walls. Bone. Fragments, remains. His breath caught. "This isn't passenger seating," he said, voice lower now. "It's holding cells." The words echoed through the calm. Avery spoke after a pause. "You're saying it's a prison transport?" Jack's light moved slowly from one compartment to the next. Chains attached to the walls. Restraint points. Metal loops bolted into the structure. Everything designed to control, to contain. "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The realization settled in. Heavy. Final. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a lost train. This was a system. Built as, and then erased. Jack stepped closer to one of the compartments. Inside, the remains were scattered, less intact than the one near the front. Time had taken more here, but the position still told the story. Confined, unable to move, unable to escape. Jack's hand tightened into a fist. He'd seen this before. Different place, different war. Same result. People treated like cargo. Ghost's bark echoed faintly in his memory. Urgent, relentless. Jack turned slightly, scanning the rest of the partition. Something about it didn't sit right. Not the bars, not the compartments, something else. Then he saw it. At the far end of the section, a reinforced door. Heavier than the first. Thicker, sealed tighter. His light lingered on it. "Orion," he said. "There's another compartment. Forward section. More secure." "What kind of secure?" Hank asked. Jack moved closer. Examined the hinges, the locking mechanism. "Not for people," he said. "For something else." Avery's voice cut in. "That's enough, Turner. You've confirmed what we needed. You come back up now." Jack didn't respond. His eyes stayed on the door. Because Ghost's reaction, it hadn't been about the train. Not entirely. It had been about something specific, something stronger, something deeper. Jack felt it now. That same pull, that same quiet pressure. Not here. Further. He exhaled slowly. "I'm not done," he said. Avery's tone hardened. That wasn't a suggestion. Jack closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. "I know." Silence. Then Avery again, controlled but firm. "You've got bodies. You've got restraints. That's enough to escalate this. You don't go deeper without clearance." Jack looked back at the compartments, at the remains, at the metal, at the system that had been built to erase people. His jaw tightened. "They didn't get clearance," he said quietly. Another silence. Longer this time. Hank didn't speak. Avery didn't answer right away. Because there wasn't a good response to that. Jack turned back toward the reinforced door. His light traced its edges. The corrosion was heavier here, the seal tighter. Whatever was behind it had been meant to stay there. Jack reached out, placed his hand against the metal. Cold, solid, final, and yet, Ghost's instinct echoed in his mind. Not here. Further. Jack pulled his hand back. Slowly, deliberately. "I'm heading up," he said finally. Avery responded immediately. "Good. Do it now." Jack didn't argue. But as he turned away from the door, he knew. That wasn't the end of it. Not even close. He moved back through the aisle, past the empty seats, past the first skeleton still locked in place. The silence felt heavier now. Not empty. Loaded. As if the space itself held memory. Held something that hadn't been allowed to leave. Jack crossed the threshold and exited the train car. The ocean closed around him again. Wider. Colder. But not lighter. He grabbed the rope line and began his ascent. Each movement steady, each breath controlled, but his mind stayed below, on the compartments, on the remains, on the door. And on one thing that had become clear, this train hadn't been built to carry people. It had been built to make them disappear. And somewhere beyond that sealed door, there was more. The surface broke again in a rush of gray light and cold air. Jack pulled himself onto the deck with less urgency this time, but more weight. Water streamed off him in steady lines, pooling at his boots as he removed his mask. No one spoke right away. They didn't need to. They saw it in his face. Avery stepped forward first. "What did you find?" Jack took a breath. Steady but heavy. "It's not a wreck," he said. "It's a transport." Hank frowned. "Transport for what?" Jack looked at him. "Prisoners." The word landed hard. Dana, who had been quiet until now, shook her head slightly. "That doesn't make sense. There's no record of anything like that out here." Jack unhooked his tank slowly, movements controlled but distant. There wouldn't be. Avery crossed his arms, jaw tight. "You're saying someone built a prison train and dropped it in the ocean?" Jack didn't answer. Because it wasn't that simple. Ghost approached him again, but this time the energy was different. The dog didn't press close, didn't settle. He moved past Jack, straight toward the starboard side of the boat, and stopped. Rigid. Focused. Jack noticed immediately. Ghost's ears were forward again, his body low, tense, His eyes locked, not on the spot they had just left, but somewhere else. Jack followed his gaze. The water stretched out, identical in every direction, except it wasn't. Not to Ghost. Jack stepped closer. "Hey!" Hank called out. "What is it now?" Jack didn't answer. He crouched beside the dog. "Talk to me," he murmured. Ghost let out a low, steady growl. Not loud, not frantic. Precise. Jack felt it again. That same pull. That same quiet signal. Not here. Further. He stood slowly. "Run the sonar again," he said. Hank blinked. "We already mapped the area." "Run it again," Jack repeated. Avery frowned. "Turner." "There's something else down there," Jack said, cutting him off, calm but firm. Ghost didn't move, didn't break focus. That was enough. Avery exhaled sharply. "Fine. One scan." Hank moved quickly, adjusting the controls. The sonar pinged again, sending out waves beneath the surface. The screen flickered. Then a second shape appeared. Fainter, smaller, offset from the main structure. Hank leaned forward. "What the?" Jack stepped into the cabin. "Zoom in." Hank adjusted the resolution. The image sharpened. Not another train car. Something attached or adjacent. A forward section, separate, reinforced. Jack's eyes narrowed. "That's it," he said quietly. Hank looked at him. "You didn't see that before?" Jack shook his head. "It's not visible from the angle I came in." Avery stepped in behind them, studying the screen. Could be debris. Could be nothing. Jack didn't respond. He turned back toward the deck. Ghost was already there, waiting. Jack grabbed his gear again. Avery's voice followed him. "You just got back up." Jack didn't slow down. I didn't finish. Avery stepped forward. "We don't even know what that is." Jack stopped at the edge of the platform, then turned slightly. "I do," he said. Avery held his gaze. "And what's that?" Jack looked back at the water. "It's the reason they built the rest of it." Silence followed. No one argued. Because something in his tone made it clear. This wasn't a guess. It was instinct. And instinct had already been right once. Jack secured his gear again. Faster this time. More direct. No hesitation. Ghost stepped closer than before, pressing into him hard. Jack paused. Looked down. The dog's eyes met his. There was something there now. Something sharper. Something urgent. Jack reached down, gripping the side of Ghost's neck. "I know," he said quietly. A beat. Then he added, "I'll be quick." Ghost didn't move, didn't relax. But he stepped back. Just enough. Jack turned and dropped into the ocean again. The descent felt shorter this time. The darkness less foreign. The cold more familiar. Jack followed the new coordinates, angling slightly away from the main train car. The structure came into view quickly. First the main body, then the extension. A forward compartment, partially buried. Heavier plating, different design. Jack slowed as he approached. This part didn't look like passenger space, didn't look like holding cells. It looked secured. He circled it once, The seams were tighter, the metal thicker, reinforced. Whatever was inside, it had been meant to stay there. Jack found the access point. A door. Smaller than the first, but stronger. The corrosion here was deeper, but the integrity held. He reached for the torch again, hesitated for a second, then ignited it. The flame cut through the water, bubbles rushing upward as heat met steel. Slow, careful, controlled. He worked the edges, melting through the seal. Time stretched, each second pulling longer. Then, a shift. The metal gave. Jack shut off the torch, grabbed the handle, pulled. The door resisted. Then, it opened. A burst of sediment exploded outward, thicker this time, clouding everything. Jack pulled back, letting it settle. His light cut through slowly. And then, it hit something. Reflective. Bright. Not bone. Not metal like the rest. Different. Jack moved closer. The beam steadied, and the truth came into view. Gold. Stacked. Bars. Perfectly shaped. Untouched. His breath caught. He shifted the light. More. Cash. Sealed bundles. Containers. And then files. Waterproof cases. Still intact, Jack's pulse spiked. This wasn't just a prison. It was payment. He reached forward, opening one of the cases. Inside, documents, stamped, official. He flipped one open. The ink was faded, but still readable. Names, dates, transfers, and markings. Red. Crossed out. Jack stared. His chest tightened. These weren't prisoners. They were entries. Records. People reduced to lines on paper. Processed, removed, erased. His hand tightened around the file. The pieces locked together. The train, the cells, the restraints. And now, the money. Jack exhaled slowly. They were paid, he said under his breath. The ocean didn't answer, but the truth was already there. Heavy, final. People had been moved, held, disposed of, and someone had been paid to make sure they never came back. Jack closed the file carefully, secured it in his vest, then grabbed another. More evidence. More proof. He wasn't leaving this behind. Because now this wasn't just discovery. This was a case. And somewhere above, Ghost had already known. Jack sealed the waterproof case and secured it tightly against his vest. His movements were slower now, heavier, not from the gear, not from the depth, but from what he carried. Proof. Not just of death, of intent. He gave the compartment one last sweep with his light. The gold bars gleamed faintly in the dim beam, stacked with precision. The bundles of currency remained bound, preserved in their sealed casing. Everything untouched. Not abandoned. Stored. Jack felt something settle deep in his chest. This wasn't chaos. This was order. Deliberate, controlled, calculated. He backed out of the compartment carefully, pulling the door as close to its original position as he could without sealing it shut. The silt shifted again, drifting slowly like a curtain falling behind him. He turned and moved back toward the main train car. The path felt longer now, the water colder, the silence louder. He crossed the threshold into the passenger section again, his light sweeping past the rows of seats, past the scattered belongings, until it landed once more on the skeleton near the window, the one still handcuffed in place. Jack slowed. He didn't want to look again. But he did. The posture hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. But now it meant something different. Before, it had been a mystery. Now, it was evidence. Jack moved closer, crouching slightly to bring his light lower. The remains were still partially covered in fragments of fabric. Dark, structured, not civilian wear. Uniform, or something close to it. He reached out carefully, brushing away a thin layer of sediment from the chest area. A small metal clasp caught the light. Jack adjusted the beam. A badge, corroded, faded, but still there. He leaned closer. The symbol was worn down, but the shape remained. Official, formal, not something bought or improvised. This wasn't a prisoner. This had been a guard. Jack leaned back slightly. A guard. Chained to his own seat. His mind moved quickly now, assembling pieces. If the guard had been restrained, then something had gone wrong. Something inside the train. Something they hadn't controlled. His pulse ticked up. He looked down the aisle again, at the empty seats, at the partition, at the cells beyond. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aftermath. Jack's breathing grew tighter. Not panic. Recognition. The kind that came when you walked into a place after everything had already happened. He stood slowly, turned away from the skeleton, and moved back toward the exit. He had what he needed, more than enough. And the longer he stayed, the more the weight of it pressed down. He stepped out into the open water again, grabbing the rope line. The ascent began. Each pull upward felt heavier than the last. Not because of the depth, because of the truth. The surface broke around him in a burst of light and sound. Voices. Movement. Hands reaching. Jack pulled himself onto the platform, water pouring off his gear. Before anyone could speak, Ghost was there. Faster than before, closer. The dog pressed against him hard, scanning, checking, nose moving along Jack's arm, his chest, his vest. Then, he stopped, right at the pouch, where the documents were stored. Ghost froze, his body stiffened, and then he let out a low, sharp growl. Not at Jack. At what Jack was carrying. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. "You feel it too," he murmured. Ghost didn't move, didn't relax. That was answer enough. "Turner," Avery said, stepping forward. "Report." Jack pulled off his mask slowly, looked at each of them, then reached into his vest. He removed the sealed case, set it down on the metal deck. The sound was louder than it should have been, vinyl. Hank stared at it. "What is that?" Jack met his eyes. "Proof." No one moved. Avery stepped closer, crouching slightly as he examined the case without touching it. "You opened the forward section," he said. Jack nodded. "What's inside?" Jack exhaled slowly. "Money," he said. "Gold. Documents." Hank blinked. "Documents of what?" Jack looked past him. "Out at the ocean." "Transfers," he said. "Names. Records." Avery's voice dropped. "Records of who?" Jack turned back. "People who never came back." The words landed harder than anything else. Silence followed. Not confusion, not disbelief. Understanding. Dana stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're saying this was intentional?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Yes." Hank shook his head slowly. "No. No, that doesn't—" "It does," Jack said. His tone wasn't sharp. It didn't need to be. He had seen it. He had touched it. That was enough. Avery stood, his expression tighter now. "We report this," he said, "immediately." Jack didn't respond. He looked at the water again. At the place where the train sat hidden beneath the surface. At the place where people had been taken, held, erased. Ghost moved closer again, resting his head lightly against Jack's leg this time. Not tense, not warning, just present. Jack placed a hand on his head. For a moment, everything slowed. The wind, the water, the sound of the boat. All of it faded behind a single realization. "They were never meant to be found," Jack said quietly. No one answered. Because they all knew it was true. And now, they had been. Which meant something else was coming. Not from below, but from above. The wind shifted first. A subtle change in direction, carrying a different sound across the water. Low at first, distant, but steady. Jack lifted his head slightly. Listened. Ghost did the same. The dog's ears snapped forward, body tightening instantly. No hesitation this time. No confusion. Recognition. Danger. Hank stepped out of the cabin, squinting into the fog. "You hear that?" Avery was already moving toward the helm. "Engine," he said. "Not ours." The sound grew louder, closer, cutting through the gray like something deliberate, not drifting, not wandering, coming straight at them. Dana moved to the rail, scanning the horizon. "That's fast. Too fast for a survey vessel." The shape appeared slowly at first, just a darker shadow inside the fog. Then the outline sharpened. A vessel. Long, low, black hull. No markings. No lights beyond what it needed to move. It didn't slow as it approached. It didn't signal. It didn't announce. It came in like it already owned the water. Jack's eyes narrowed. "They're here for it," he said quietly. Avery glanced at him. "You don't know that." Jack didn't look away from the approaching ship. "I do." Ghost let out a low growl, stepping forward, placing himself slightly ahead of Jack. Protective. Ready. The vessel cut its engines just off their port side. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise that came before it. A small boarding craft detached almost immediately, most efficient. 3 men, then 4. All in dark uniforms. No insignia, no names. Weapons visible, but not raised. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. They moved like men who expected compliance. Avery stepped forward as they reached the deck. "This is a private survey vessel," he said, voice controlled. "State your authority." The lead man stepped up without hesitation. Mid-50s, clean cut, eyes cold, too calm. He held up a badge briefly, too fast to read clearly, then lowered it. "We're assuming control of this site," he said. "Not a request. A statement." Avery frowned. Under whose jurisdiction? The man's expression didn't change. "That's not your concern." Jack watched him carefully. The tone, the posture, the lack of explanation. He had seen this before. Different uniform, same authority. Ghost's growl deepened. The man's eyes flicked toward the dog for a split second, measured, assessing, then back to Avery. "You've recovered materials," he continued. "We'll need everything you've collected." Hank stepped back instinctively. "We just found it." "Everything," the man repeated. Dana crossed her arms tightly. "You don't even know what we have." The man looked at her. And for the first time there was something else in his expression. Not anger. Not impatience. Certainty. "Yes," he said. "We do." Silence fell over the deck. Jack felt it settle. Heavy. Final. They knew. Before they got here. Avery straightened slightly. "We're obligated to log all findings through proper channels." The man took a step closer. Deliberate. "And we are the proper channel," he said. 2 of the other agents moved past him, already beginning to scan the deck, checking equipment, opening storage compartments without asking. Hank stepped forward. "Hey." One of the agents didn't even look at him as he moved a case aside. Dana's jaw tightened. "You can't just—" "We can," the lead man said, cutting her off. Jack hadn't moved. Not yet. He stood near the rail, watching everything. Tracking movement. Counting positions. 4 men. Armed. Disciplined. Not improvising. Not reacting. Executing. The lead man finally turned his attention to him. "You're the diver," he said. Jack didn't answer. The man stepped closer. Close enough now that Jack could see the faint scar beneath his left eye. Old. Healed, but not forgotten. "You went inside," the man continued. Still not a question. Jack held his gaze. "Yes." The man studied him for a moment longer, then smiled. Not friendly, not warm, just satisfied. "And what did you find?" he asked. Jack didn't respond. The silence stretched. The man's smile faded slightly. Then he leaned in, voice dropping just enough that only Jack could hear it clearly. "You didn't see anything," he said. A statement. A warning. Jack didn't blink. "I saw enough," he replied. The man's eyes hardened. Ghost stepped forward instantly, placing himself between them. Low stance, teeth barely visible. A quiet line drawn. The man glanced down at the dog again, this time longer, then back up. "You should keep him under control," he said. Jack didn't move, Ghost. Didn't step back. "They already are," he said. The two men behind the leader returned, one of them holding a piece of equipment from the deck. "No visible media," one reported. "Check inside," the leader replied. Hank's head snapped toward the cabin. "Hey, those are our systems." One of the agents brushed past him without slowing. Dana moved as if to follow, but Avery raised a hand slightly, not stopping her. Just cautioning. Because they all understood now. This wasn't a discussion. This was containment. The leader straightened, stepping back from Jack. "You will provide coordinates," he said. Avery hesitated, just for a second, then gave a set of numbers. Jack listened. Carefully. They were close, but not exact. Avery met his eyes for a brief moment. Jack understood. The leader nodded once. "You will clear this area immediately." "And if we don't?" Hank asked before he could stop himself. The man looked at him. No anger, no threat in his voice, just certainty. "Then you won't be here when we return." The meaning settled without needing explanation. A long silence followed. Then the man turned. His team moved with him. Efficient, controlled. Within moments, they were back on their vessel. No rush, no doubt. The engines came back to life. The ship pulled away into the fog as quickly as it had arrived. And then, they were gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Hank exhaled slowly. Who the hell were they? No one answered. Dana leaned against the rail, shaking her head slightly. They knew. They knew everything. Avery stared out at the fog, where the vessel had disappeared. We shouldn't have found this. Jack didn't look at the water. He looked at Ghost. The dog had relaxed slightly, but not fully. Still alert. Still watching. They didn't come for the train, Jack said quietly. Avery turned. What? Jack met his eyes. They came for the truth. No one spoke, because they all felt it now. The shift, the line that had been crossed. This wasn't discovery anymore. It was exposure. And exposure came with consequences. Jack's hand moved instinctively to the pouch at his vest. The evidence was still there. Untouched, unseen. Because while the others had been searching the deck, he hadn't been standing still. And Ghost had made sure of that. The dog moved closer again, pressing lightly against Jack's leg. Steady, present. Jack exhaled slowly. They think they took everything, he said. Avery looked at him. Did they? Jack shook his head once. No. And for the first time since the boat had left the dock, something shifted again. Not fear, not dread, something sharper, something controlled. A decision. Because now, they weren't just witnesses, they were targets. And that meant one thing. This wasn't over. The Orion drifted in uneasy silence, the fog closing in again, as if nothing had happened. but everything had changed. No one moved for a long moment. Hank finally broke it. "We should leave," he said. "Now." Dana nodded quickly. "They told us to clear out. We've got enough reason to." Avery didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the water, his jaw tight, weighing something heavier than orders. Jack stood apart from them, near the rail, Ghost at his side. Watching, waiting. "They'll come back," Jack said. Avery glanced over. "Yeah, probably." Jack shook his head slightly. "Not probably. Definitely." The certainty in his voice settled over the group. Dana crossed her arms. "Then we shouldn't be here when they do." Hank nodded. "Exactly. We got what we needed. We report it. Let someone else handle it." Jack looked at him. "That's exactly what they want," he said. Hank frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means we hand it off," Jack replied, calm but firm, "and it disappears again." Silence followed. Because they all knew it was possible. Avery exhaled slowly. "You think they control the reporting channels?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't have to. The way those men moved, the way they spoke, the way they didn't explain anything, that wasn't oversight. That was control. Ghost shifted slightly, pressing closer to Jack. Not tense, focused. Jack felt it again. That quiet signal, not fear, direction. He looked down. Ghost's head tilted slightly toward the deck. Not the water. Not the horizon. The boat. Jack's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" he murmured. Ghost stepped away from him, slow, deliberate, then walked toward the center of the deck. Stopped. Looked back. Jack followed. The others watched, confused. Hank let out a breath. "What's he doing?" Jack didn't answer. Ghost moved again, heading toward a section near the equipment storage, a grated panel built into the floor, partially covered by a loose tarp. Jack stepped closer. Ghost stopped directly over it. Sat. Still. Silent. Jack stared at the panel, then crouched down. He pulled the tarp aside. The metal grate underneath was worn but intact, bolted into place but not sealed. A maintenance access point. "Turner?" Avery said cautiously. "What are you doing?" Jack ran a hand along the edge of the grate, felt the slight give. "Where did they search?" he asked. Hank blinked. "What?" "The agents," Jack said. "Where did they check?" Hank gestured vaguely. "Cabin, storage, gear cases, most of the deck." Jack nodded slowly, then looked at the grate again. "They didn't check this," Avery stepped closer. "Because it's not storage, it's structural access." Jack didn't look up. "Exactly." He reached for a wrench from the nearby toolkit and began loosening the bolts. Hank frowned. "You planning something?" Jack didn't answer. One by one, the bolts came loose. The grate lifted with a dull creak. Below, a narrow compartment. Dark. Empty. Perfect. Jack exhaled slowly. Ghost remained still beside him. Watching. Jack reached into his vest and pulled out the sealed case. The one with the documents. The proof. He looked at it for a moment, then down into the compartment, then back at Ghost. "You led me here," he said quietly. Ghost didn't move, didn't react, but his eyes stayed locked on Jack. Jack nodded once. "Yeah," he murmured. "I get it." He lowered the case carefully into the compartment, then reached back into his vest. The second set of documents. Smaller, more fragile. He placed those in too. Everything that mattered, everything that couldn't be replaced. Then he closed the grate, secured the bolts, pulled the tarp back over it. Just another part of the deck again. Invisible. Gone. Avery watched the entire process in silence. When Jack stood, their eyes met. "You're hiding it," Avery said. Jack nodded. "For now." Hank stepped closer. "You think they'll come back and search again?" Jack looked at him, yes. Dana's voice was tight. "And if they find it?" Jack shook his head. "They won't." A beat. Then he added, "Not unless we give them a reason to." Avery studied him. "What's the plan then?" Jack glanced at Ghost. The dog had relaxed slightly now. Not fully, but enough. The tension had shifted. The immediate threat had passed. Now it was something else. Something longer. Jack turned back to Avery. "We document everything," he said. "We copy what we can, and we send it somewhere they can't reach it fast enough to shut it down." Hank frowned. "You got someone in mind?" Jack didn't answer right away. But the thought had already formed. A name. A memory. A contact from a different life. Someone who didn't scare easy. Someone who had already paid the price for telling the truth once. "Yeah," Jack said finally. "I do." Dana crossed her arms. "And you trust them?" Jack looked out at the ocean, then back at her. "No," he said. A pause. Then, "But I trust what they'll do with it." Silence settled again. Different this time. Not fear, not uncertainty. Focus. Avery nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "We do it your way." Hank let out a breath. This just went from a job to something else. Jack gave a slight nod. "Yeah." Ghost stepped closer again, resting lightly against his leg. Steady. Present. Jack placed a hand on his head. "Good call," he murmured. "Because without the dog, the evidence would have been gone. Taken. Erased. Just like everything else. But now, it wasn't. And that changed everything. The Orion's engine rumbled back to life. Slow. Deliberate. They began to move away from the coordinates. From the train. From the place where the truth had been buried. But Jack knew. They weren't leaving it behind. They were carrying it with them. Hidden. Protected. Waiting. Because the next move would decide everything. The Orion cut through the gray water, leaving behind nothing but a faint trail of wake that disappeared almost as quickly as it formed. The fog thickened again, swallowing the horizon, turning the world into something small and uncertain. Jack stood at the stern, one hand resting on the cold rail. Ghost beside him. Watching. Always watching. Below them, the train remained where it had been hidden for decades. Silent. Waiting. But not for long. Jack turned and headed inside. The cabin felt tighter now, smaller, like the walls themselves knew what they were holding. Hank was already working, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "I backed up everything I could before they boarded," he said without looking up. "Video, sonar logs, timestamps. Not perfect, but it's something." Dana sat across from him, scanning through still frames. "It's enough," she said quietly. "More than enough." Avery stood near the chart table, staring down at the coordinates, not the real ones. The ones he had given. Jack stepped in. "We don't send everything at once," he said. Hank paused. "Why not?" "Because if it disappears," Jack replied, "we lose it all." Dana nodded slowly. "Stagger the release." Jack gave a slight nod. "Exactly." Avery looked up. "And where are we sending it?" Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn phone. Not the one he used every day. An older one. Cleaner. He turned it on. The screen flickered to life. A contact list appeared. Short, deliberate. He scrolled once, then stopped. A name. Emily Carter. Dana glanced at the screen. "Who's that?" Jack didn't take his eyes off it. "Someone who doesn't quit," he said. Hank leaned back slightly. "Reporter?" Jack nodded once. "Used to be everywhere." Then she started digging in the wrong places. Avery crossed his arms. "Meaning?" "Meaning they shut her down," Jack said. "Pulled her access. Blacklisted her name." Dana frowned. "So why trust her?" Jack looked up. "Because she didn't stop." Silence followed. That was enough. Jack tapped the screen. The line rang once, twice, then a click. "Yeah?" A woman's voice answered, cautious, alert. Jack didn't hesitate. "Emily," he said. "It's Jack Turner." A pause, longer this time. Then, "I thought you were dead," she said. "Not yet." Another pause. Then her voice shifted, sharper, focused. "What do you have?" Jack glanced around the cabin, at Avery, at Hank, at Dana, at Ghost, then back at the phone. "Something you're going to want to see," he said. It took less than an hour. Hank encrypted the files, layered protection, multiple pathways. Dana verified everything, cross-checked timestamps, cleaned the footage, marked the keyframes. Avery kept the boat steady, but his eyes never stopped scanning the horizon. And Jack waited. He didn't rush, didn't second-guess. He had made the decision. Now he followed through. Ghost stayed close, closer than before. Every sound, every shift, the dog tracked it, not panicked, not reactive, prepared. Jack crouched beside him once. "You feel it too, huh?" he murmured. Ghost didn't move, but his eyes stayed locked on the door. Jack nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." The transfer completed. A soft tone from the laptop. Hank leaned back. "It's out." Dana exhaled slowly. "All of it?" Jack shook his head. "Enough." Avery turned slightly. "And now?" Jack didn't answer right away. He stepped back outside. The fog had lifted just enough to reveal a faint line of sky. Lighter breaking. He looked out across the water. Then, a sound. Distant, but familiar. Another engine. Hank stepped out behind him. "You hear that?" Jack nodded. Ghost was already moving, positioning himself between Jack and the edge of the deck. Low. Alert. The sound grew louder. But this time, it wasn't just one vessel. Shapes began to emerge through the fog. Multiple. Different sizes. Different silhouettes. Dana stepped out, eyes widening. "That's not the same ship." Avery grabbed the binoculars, lifting them quickly. "No," he said. "It's not." Jack watched. Waited. The lead vessel came into clearer view. White hull, marked official, and behind it, more. Research ships, press vessels, observation craft, a convoy. Dana let out a breath. What the hell is this? Jack didn't take his eyes off the approaching fleet. "It's what happens," he said quietly, "when the truth gets out." The lead ship slowed as it approached. A boarding craft lowered, but this time, everything felt different. No urgency, no intimidation, no silence. Just purpose. A woman stepped onto the deck as the craft docked. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm, controlled. She looked around once, then directly at Jack. "You sent it," she said. Not a question. Jack nodded. She stepped closer. "I'm Commander Rachel Marlowe," she said. "International Maritime Oversight." Avery lowered the binoculars slowly. "Oversight?" Marlowe nodded. "We received a data package early this morning. Multiple redundancies. Verified from independent sources within minutes." Her eyes stayed on Jack. "You made it impossible to bury." Jack didn't respond. He didn't need to. Marlowe turned slightly, gesturing toward the ships behind her. "We've secured the area. Divers are en route. Documentation teams, legal observers, international press." Dana stared. "That fast?" Marlowe met her gaze. "When something like this surfaces, it moves." Hank let out a quiet laugh. "Guess we picked the right person." Jack looked at Ghost. The dog had relaxed slightly. Not fully, but enough. The tension had shifted again. From immediate danger to something else. Exposure, accountability. Marlowe stepped closer to Jack. "Whatever this is," she said, "it doesn't stay hidden anymore." Jack finally exhaled. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. Because for the first time, they weren't alone in it. He looked out across the water again. At the growing fleet. At the breaking light. At the place where the train still waited below. And for the first time since he had seen it, The silence didn't feel like control. It felt like it was ending. The ocean moved the same way it always had. Ooh. Endless. Unbothered by what it carried beneath its surface. But above, everything had changed. Ships surrounded the coordinates now, forming a wide perimeter. Their engines hummed in low harmony, a constant presence where there had once been nothing but fog and isolation. Cranes extended over the water. Cables descended. Divers moved in coordinated teams, their lights piercing the depths like distant stars. Jack stood on the Orion's deck, watching it all unfold. Ghost sat beside him. Still. Steady. The dog's ears flicked occasionally, tracking movement, but his posture had softened. The tension that had once kept him rigid had eased into something calmer. Not gone. Just settled. "They're bringing it up," Hank said quietly, stepping beside Jack. Jack nodded. He didn't take his eyes off the water. A ripple formed near the center of the operation, then another. The cables tightened. The sea resisted at first, reluctant, heavy, like it didn't want to give up what it had kept hidden for so long. Then, slowly, it did. The top edge of the train car broke the surface. Water poured off it in sheets, cascading down rusted steel as it rose inch by inch into the gray daylight. No one spoke. Not on the Orion, not on the surrounding vessels, not even over the comms. Because there was nothing to say. The truth was already there, visible, undeniable. Jack felt his chest tighten slightly as more of the structure emerged. The windows, the doors, the long, silent shape of it. A ghost of something that had never been meant to return. Ghost stood, moved closer to the rail, watched. Not with fear, not with aggression, with recognition. As if he understood, this was what he had been trying to show. Piece by piece, the train car rose from the ocean until it hung suspended in the air, dripping, exposed, real. The cranes rotated slowly, guiding it toward a waiting platform vessel. When it touched down, the sound was dull. Final. Like something closing. Hours passed, then days. And then, everything moved faster. The footage spread. The documents were verified. Names began to surface. Real names. People who had been reported missing, dismissed, forgotten. Now, found. Jack didn't stay at the center of it. He didn't give interviews, didn't stand in front of cameras. That wasn't his place. He stayed near the edges, watching, listening, making sure it didn't disappear again. Ghost never left his side. Weeks later, the train car stood inside a secured structure along the Oregon coast. Not hidden, not buried, preserved. Lights illuminated its surface now, cleaned but not restored. The damage remained, the history remained. Jack walked slowly along the pathway beside it, Ghost beside him. The building was quiet, not empty, but respectful. People moved through it carefully, some reading, some standing still, some remembering. Jack paused near one of the windows, the same type he had looked through in the dark. Only now, there was light. Clear, unforgiving. He could see the interior, the seats, the space, the place where he had found the first skeleton. Now empty, but not erased. A small plaque rested beneath the glass. No long explanation, just names, one after another. Ghost stepped forward slightly, his nose lifting toward the glass. Jack watched him, then placed a hand gently on his back. "You found them," he said quietly. Ghost didn't move, but his tail shifted once. Subtle. Enough. Jack looked back at the train, at the steel, at the structure that had once been meant to hide everything. Now, it held nothing back. Footsteps approached from behind. Dana, Avery, Hank. They had all come. Not as a crew this time. Just people. Avery stopped beside Jack. "They're building a permanent memorial," he said. "Right here." Jack nodded. "They should." Hank exhaled slowly. "Never thought I'd see something like this." Dana crossed her arms, her eyes scanning the interior. At least it didn't stay down there. Jack looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "At least it didn't." A quiet settled between them. Not heavy, not tense, just still. Ghost stepped forward again, then turned back toward Jack. "Waiting." Jack gave a slight nod. "All right," he murmured. He stepped back from the glass, turned away. But before he left, he placed his hand once against the cold steel, just for a second. Not for himself, for them. "You're not forgotten," he said under his breath. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Because now, they were true. Jack turned, walked toward the exit, Ghost at his side. The doors opened. Light spilled in. Outside, the ocean stretched wide and endless, the same as it had always been. But different now, because something had changed. Not the water, not the horizon, but what it held, and what it had finally given back. Jack took a slow breath. Deep, deady. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clear. Ghost moved ahead slightly, then stopped, glancing back. Checking, always checking. Jack gave a small nod. "I'm right here," he said. And this time, he meant it. If you believe the truth should always come to light, no matter how deep it's buried, comment 1. If not, comment 0 and tell us where you're watching from. And if stories about justice, loyalty, and standing your ground mean something to you, consider subscribing. There's more coming your way.